Okay, everyone, welcome to this session, this student panel on ePortfolios, which I know we're all really excited about. My name is Tracy Penny-Light, and I'm the moderator for this session. And I just want to take a moment to thank you all for being here so much. We really do value student voices at Able, and it's invaluable to hear your perspective. So thanks so much for being here. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes from Able. We have some opportunities for you to stay connected, and so the QR codes next to each of the things will take you to the place where you can go ahead and find out more information about our Digital Ethics Task Force, the AAC and U Forum on Open Learning and ePortfolios that'll be happening in January, an opportunity to submit your work to the International Journal of ePortfolio and or the Able ePortfolio Review. So I hope that you'll take the opportunity to just share your work and your learning with the rest of the community, because we really all learn from one another. We have postponed our Shark Tank, which was supposed to happen over the conference. We've wanting to give that event a little bit more time, so we've decided to postpone until September. We'll be sending out more information about that shortly. And then finally, I wanted to let you know that our Digital Ethics Task Force is actually currently engaged in an ePortfolio mapping project. And so there's a bit of information about this on the slide, and I'm going to go ahead and post in the chat the link to the survey. So we really would appreciate you filling that out, and you can be in touch with either Megan Mize or Sarah Zerhalen for more information about the project. So I don't want to take up any more time, because I really want to turn it over to you, Debbie. And I once again welcome you all to this panel on student voices in ePortfolio.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I am going to share screen and hope we end up on the right page. As I do that, we did not. Let's see what we can do here. All right. In the chat, I am going to share the link to a website that maybe we'll call a presentation ePortfolio that the panelists built with me as we were thinking about what we might want to share and how we might want to share it. So we thought, what better way to engage Able than to have something like a collective project as our website, and maybe we could call it an ePortfolio. We will have the opportunity to reflect afterwards, and then each of our panelists has designed a tab area that you can also click on to see some of the things they're talking about that might help you raise questions. So first and foremost, I want to thank the invited panelists, Sophie, Inga, Sheila, Michael, Yakub, and Jada for joining us today. They are hailing from Indianapolis and Portland, and we are excited to hear what they have to say. A quick breakdown of how we're going to share. First, we're going to hear from 3 students as they give brief introductions. As they talk, I will click on their page and we'll scroll while they introduce themselves. Then we'll open the floor for about 10 minutes of Q&A, and then the next 3 students will share a little bit about themselves, and then it's a free-for-all after that. So any quick questions for me as we get started? Perfect. So Michael, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, I'm Michael. I was a student in Debbie's W231 class, which led to the culminating project of a recommendation report that we did in ePortfolio style. So most of my experience with ePortfolios has been in project-based. I do have a little bit of experience making a personal ePortfolio, but that's still in progress. I did the project for a local client, a nursing home in the area, and we compiled all of our research into a website format. And you can see a screenshot of the homepage there if you want to click through it. It is just a way of organizing the information rather than giving them a sheet full of information, a packet rather full of information. In the near future, I'll have some more experience with ePortfolios, so I was thankful for Debbie's introduction to them. As I'm entering the LHSI program, which I believe a couple of you will know about. It is an internship program that culminates in another project-based e-portfolio about your experience with the work. And on my webpage, I have a link to some my personal project e-portfolio and some examples of the LHSI portfolios.
Perfect. Thank you. Yakub.
Hello, my name is Yakub. I am a rising junior IUPUI. I'm majoring in psychology and minoring in Arabic. The first e-portfolio I worked on was with Debbie as well. It was in my W131 class, and it was meant to showcase an immersion experience of my choosing for that semester. I had chosen to speak kind of about water pollution and the way it's affecting the environment in modern day, and just kind of like how we led up to that. My second e-portfolio that I worked on was this past year, and it was meant to track and showcase my achievements as well as my progress at LHSI, which is what Michael was just talking about. I was actually an LHSI intern all of last year. So throughout the whole year, I was actually developing my e-portfolio and just kind of updating monthly, kind of reflecting on what I did for the month, what I learned, and my goals after the internship. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Jada.
Hello, my name is Jada White. I will be a sophomore this coming year, and I'm majoring in biology and forensic science on a pre-med track with a few other things. I recently took in the spring of 22, W231, which is professional writing skills with Debbie. I did two e-portfolios. One was a course-oriented e-portfolio, and it's just where we got to turn in assignments in a unique way and understand strategic ways to design and keep an audience involved. And then the second one was a project-oriented e-portfolio with a community client. And the community client that we did was IU School of Medicine. And we wanted to understand the impact of the advising process on graduation rates at IUPUI. And it started out with academic research with databases, and then we expanded to the internet. And then eventually we took that information and created a local study that we sent out to both students and advisors. And then we've reflected on that and came up with some practical suggestions for both students and the advisors at IUPUI to hopefully improve some situations. And this has helped me land spots on IUPUI campus, such as a research lab that I work in. And I think that's it.
Perfect. Well, these three graciously joined us today, and they're undergraduates who primarily have done work with e-portfolios at the course level and then in internships. And so I want to open the floor. What questions do you have for our students that would kind of tap into their experiences and areas of expertise? And you can type questions in the chat, or you should be able to unmute and raise a question.
I have a question. I was just curious as to whether the students how they're considering, or if they're considering pulling all of their e-portfolios together into one as they continue, or are they intending to keep them separate? And if they are going to pull them together, what do they think that's going to look like?
Great question.
I personally have an e-portfolio, my personal one that I've started to pull selected works in. So I find that like the e-portfolio, or at least at this stage in my academic career, is more about like an organizational tool and something that I can share. It's like an organizational tool where I can put the work into a presentable fashion that's not a series of Microsoft Word drafts or Google Docs. So I find that I like to put selected works on there, things I'm really proud of, or things that I feel have really like shown a lot of growth, or really demonstrate an understanding, and kind of put those on my page under selected headings to organize it and display work that I feel is worthy of being shared.
Perfect. One more student response.
I would say for my two e-portfolios, if I were to in the future make like a collective e-portfolio to showcase everything I've done, I would probably include like hyperlinks of the work I've done. But I feel like the e-portfolios I have so far are two very separate like genres kind of. So putting them together in one wouldn't really like do them justice. I feel like each one just needs its own independence and its own, kind of light to shine in. So I wouldn't really put them together. But if I were to do in the future like a collective e-portfolio of everything I've done, I would probably include hyperlinks of it just to show things I've done in the past.
Thank you, Yakub. So we've got several questions in the chat, and Rachel Swinsford said, is there one word that you would use to describe your e-portfolio experience? And if you guys can just like attack the chat and start typing that. And then Maria was saying, what did you think about e-portfolios before you started, right? So the first day of class, many of us introduce e-portfolios and share examples, and then after you completed it. So Jada, would you be willing to start us off? What were your thoughts about ePortfolio before and then after?
Before, when I first started, I felt like it was a lot of information at once and it seemed very complicated and intricate. Near the end, I felt a lot better and relaxed about it. It was a lot more organized and I felt very accomplished because I felt like it was something professional that I haven't experienced in another classroom setting. And it wasn't just test based. It was actually getting to gain extra knowledge on like networking and talking to other people and professionally sending emails and things like that.
And even if you haven't introduced yourself yet, Sophie, Inga, Sheila, feel free to jump in.
If I can add to that, I would say that overwhelming overall was my first impression, like Jada. But once you get through it and get through the other side of it, I really come to appreciate how valuable it is as a working professional, as my identity out in the professional world. So, I plan on using it in the future for applying for positions and further growing in my professional development.
Thank you.
Like both mentioned, just like initially when I had done my first e-portfolio with Professor Debbie, it was like kind of overwhelming to think about making a whole website. But after doing it that first semester and working with her, I found that when I started working on my second e-portfolio for my internship, it was very quick, very easy. I was literally able to like breeze through everything. And so I think once you get the gist of it, it's something that's very simple and it can be utilized as a very good tool.
And Kathleen asks, and this is great for us to know, what's challenging about creating the e-portfolios so we can better support you through those initial challenges?
For me personally, I feel like...
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jake.
Okay, for me personally, I felt like it was honestly just finding the, not database, I can't think of the word, but the platform that you create your e-portfolio on. I feel like that was the hardest part for me. The one that I ended up using was Wix, and the one downfall for it was like you can only have one person working on it at one time or it won't save everyone's work. But that was like personally
I think for me, the most intimidating part of it was the web design aspect, because it's all well and great when you're doing it in Wix, but it just gets overwhelming very quickly. And one issue my group ran into was that the web design platform we were using, Wix, wasn't letting us do some of the things we wanted. So the girl in my group who was in charge of web design actually took the time out of her schedule to build one from scratch. And it was a lot of time. While it's not like the most fluid or like not professional, what's the word? I guess maybe professional is the word I'm looking for. That was like the biggest challenge for me, was like finding a way to get the website to do and look like you want while also maintaining like that sleek look that you would like to have.
So was there a moment of reward, Michael?
I think that there was. got to class and met as our group, and we looked down, we saw the website, we had been frustrated and like looking for the solution to the issue. And she said, so last night I went through, I redid the whole website, I moved everything over, and we looked through it, and it was doing what we wanted. It was flowing, and it was doing like the tabs were working, and everything was sitting where we needed it to. So it did end out okay. It just took like that extra step that I think some people are scared to try, but it did work out for us in the end.
If I can add to that, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
If I can add to that, I think learning the platform and that learning curve for any platform that you're in, can be intimidating, especially if you don't have a technical background. And so, especially if you have it compressed over a term or a series of weeks to learn it and get the product up and going, that can be a big hurdle.
So there's so many great questions in the chat. If any of you want to kind of type on the side to kind of address some of these, but always feel free to take to your mics for our panelists. I'm noticing Nora's. How do you see your ePortfolio or ePortfolios on campus affecting change or informing decisions that you're making?
I think I'd like to tackle this question real quick. I'll introduce myself a little bit more in depth later, but one of the things I'll talk about is doing my capstone project for my senior year this coming fall as an ePortfolio like centered project. And that has kind of shifted my thinking while I'm doing my shadowing experiences for physical therapy this summer. I'm on a pre-PT track. As I'm doing that, I'm kind of thinking more actively when I'm in that shadowing experience so that I can reflect on it and record and document all these things for my ePortfolio capstone project. So that has kind of affected how I am learning in my shadowing experience right now.
Well, I think we're at a spot where like Sophie, if you'll go ahead and introduce yourself, and Inga and Sheila will go right after that.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sophie. I am about to be a senior at IUPUI, and I'm a biology student on a pre-PT track. I have a few experiences with ePortfolio so far. I started in Debbie's professional writing course with the course-based and project-based ePortfolios. My community client was the Women for Change organization on IUPUI's campus. And my team and I was the team lead. We worked on best marketing practices for an on-campus student organization. And I have a link to that recommendation report and also my course ePortfolio on the website. Currently, after experiencing that class, I applied to be an ePortfolio studio consultant. So the ePortfolio studio was kind of built early last summer when I took the job. I was on a team of 3 people, and we kind of built this on-campus student resource from the ground up. And Debbie and Rachel, they're both in this meeting today, are both my new bosses right now. So this is really exciting. I'm excited to keep building it because it's still a really new resource. So I'm excited to see how it progresses this year. And then I mentioned briefly just a little bit ago about my capstone project for my senior year. I'll be documenting and doing some research type of projects as well, based in physical therapy treatments and things like that, mostly centered around my shadowing experience. And then on this website, I have a picture of our studio, and then I also have a video that we worked on in the spring with a group of video students.
Yep.
We made a little series, and I just included one of those videos there.
Thank you, Sophie. Inga, take it away.
Yes, hello. So my name is Inga Maras. I'm a recent graduate of the Educational Leadership and Policy Post-Secondary Adult Continuing Education Master's Program at Portland State University. In 2018, I decided to return to school to pursue a master's degree with a focus on teaching adult learners and training and development. A little bit about me. In addition to being a graduate student, I'm also a mom of a 5.5-year-old, a full-time employee at the university, and one of the first members of my family to attend college.
Mm-hmm.
As part of my master's program, students are required to complete a 10-week comprehensive examination project course, also referred to as COMPS. The COMPS project consisted of 3 components. First, a theory to practice paper that described a problem in educational practice, supporting literature, and a proposed intervention. And then next, due to COVID protocols, we had a virtual presentation of the intervention. And finally, an e-portfolio where students detail their guiding principles and demonstrate their learning related to the program learning outcomes. All 3 components were completed over the course of 10 weeks. There was also an optional comps prep class taught by our wonderful Candace Reynolds, who is here today. Big shout out to Candace.
Yes.
That was available, that delved further into creating the e-portfolio and provided opportunities to start identifying memorable learning experiences for reflection. For context, the comps project was my first exposure to creating an e-portfolio. Being a degree-oriented e-portfolio, comp students were provided with a template in PebblePad to build upon, which provide a great launching point for personalization. My own theme was that learning is like climbing a mountain. Once you reach the summit of one mountain, you see the peak of the next mountain across the valley and realize that you have many, many more mountains yet to climb. In the College of Education, of course, reflection is an essential aspect of our professional practice. On the guiding principles page, for example, we had an opportunity to reflect and solidify our guiding principles as educators. And for learning outcomes, such as the learner facilitation, we reflected on the skills gained and lessons learned from a specific academic experience. While working on our COMPS e-portfolios, we were also able to review previous student submissions and work with partners to get feedback on our projects. Throughout the e-portfolio, there was also opportunities for reflection on our academic journey. And I'm really excited to be here and talk more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sheila.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sheila Maluli, and I'm joining you from Portland, Oregon. I come to you as a mid-career professional who just recently completed my doctorate degree in post-secondary educational leadership and policy. A little bit more about me. My background is at the intersection of language and culture. For 27 years, I've been teaching English to speakers of other languages. As you can see, I'm really thrilled that Candace Reynolds is here with us today. I have to give her a shout out as my esteemed colleague, friend, doctoral advisor, and dissertation chair. It's hard to believe that that picture was just last month. But
wow.
The short of the story is that we connected around the wisdom of integrated learning and reflection as a tool for working across disciplines. And we also connected around authentic full spectrum digital identities. A little bit about my identities. There's a link to my teaching philosophy, which is at the moment, all of my e-portfolios are one e-portfolio. So I have, well, with the exception of the 2 portfolios I built for my dissertation. So I built an e-portfolio for the proposal stage of the doctorate and then again for the final defense. And as someone who is a mid-career professional, it was particularly rewarding to integrate all aspects of my professional life, including my background in critical internationalization and also my background as a PSU Futures Collaboratory member. Maybe I can speak later a little bit about futures thinking and how this ties in. There are a few other goodies for you here. There's a case study about building community and foresighfulness. There is also another case study which is about using arts-based research, specifically poetic inquiry. I could go on and on, but I will leave it at this. I really, I found the e-portfolio process quite transformative. It really was a way to integrate and build and layer and also organize content and share it out. I'm very interested in the e-climate around how we can use e-portfolios to democratize sense-making, meaning-making, and knowledge production. So thank you.
Thank you all. I am going to stop sharing so we can kind of see each other a little more fully, but I did repost access to the page, to the ePortfolio presentation materials in the chat if you want access to that. And I want to go back and pick up so many great things happening in the chat. Thank you, students. I forget that you all can do 7 things at once. Looking at Amy's question, do you all see yourself using e-portfolio skills, what you learned through the process of making the portfolio, in other areas of your life?
Well, I know personally that the ePortfolio skills have already come up again since my coursework, as I enter like an internship program that has us build an ePortfolio at the end of it. So I am grateful that I got to like have an intro to these skills, and I feel like that's going to help a lot when I'm building that later in life. I also find that I've been using the idea of organization that comes along with ePortfolios a lot more in my writing and in my organization of other things. Even with note taking, I've started doing more headings and more like subtabs and like separating things out more by subject, the same way that you would do in an ePortfolio, to kind of organize it and help my brain have a better grasp on the information.
I can add on a few thoughts. Similar to what Inga mentioned, I definitely plan to use the ePortfolio in my job search. I'm currently on the market looking for new academic homes. I'll just be so bold as to say that. I'm also really looking forward to using ePortfolios to continue to collaborate and to present and write. So Candace and other dear friends who are here, I'm happy to say, we've been talking about writing specifically about using the ePortfolio within the context of the Doctorate of Education. While I'm happy to say I'm the second person, I'm quite proud to say, who completed this multi-paper format in the College of Education. And at present, the ePortfolio is sort of strongly recommended, but it's not really formally part of the process. And I do believe we have a lot of reflection and points on why it might be a consideration for moving forward. But I really like this idea that it's about intentionally collecting, gathering, connecting, and organizing in a way that is more democratic than behind an academic paywall.
Sheila, this is kind of putting you on the spot. Have you seen overlap between your professional work at the university and skills strategy mindsets from folio thinking?
I think it's sort of like a shift in the way you think. I've always identified as a very visual thinker, and I feel like this played to the skills well. I've started thinking about the connections between my different skill sets and personal and professional endeavors. I do think that it sort of shifts the way you start to think in folios. I don't really have a better way to describe that, but I bet you do.
I don't know. I just say that. It's like my brain now organizes in portfolios, everything. So I say ePortfolio everything is how I track and work. I want to look back at Katie's question. When you're instructors or during internships, when there were ePortfolio assignments introduced, what were some of the most helpful assignments or activities to kind of get you on the pathway?
For me, Debbie was my professor, and what she did, we used Canvas as a platform for IUPUI. And so what she did was she did an overview of the entire semester and what it was going to look like, which seemed overwhelming at first, but then it kind of clicked once we started getting into it on our first week. And so what she did was week by week, she would add the new material that we needed, but she wouldn't overload us with it.
And Jada, the first time we did ePortfolios, you had finished part of writing project 1 and you were adding that material, and Sophie came to class to help you build the shell. What was that like?
It was very helpful. I feel like organization wise. Sorry, I don't really know what you mean.
It's okay. So it's one thing to talk about building an ePortfolio. It's another thing to do it live in class. I'm going to mute Sophie and ask you to pick up from there.
Yes. Hi. Part of my job as an ePortfolio studio consultant is I do go around to classes and start introducing students to the ePortfolio format and just various platforms that are you can use. In Debbie's class, Wix was one of the big ones, and while it's pretty user friendly, it's a little bit overwhelming at first when you're starting it. So one thing that I like that Debbie did in class when I had her and that I helped her with when I came to talk to the students and as well as when I actually do kickoffs for different classes is actively walking through whichever platform of choice we're using and building it live, like Debbie said. I think that's really helpful because you can watch someone do something and not really know what types of questions you have until hours afterwards. And you're just like, oh, I should ask that. And so doing that type of format in class is really helpful. I found it super helpful as a student, and I hope it's like a good support as I do it as a consultant now.
Going off of that, I think one of the biggest things with this is like the visually being able to see what's expected of you. I know that not only did Debbie have like a layout website that kind of walked you through the process in ePortfolio form so you could kind of follow along that way. She gave examples of previous ePortfolios and being able to look through those even after we finished like the live stuff was a good way to go back and get some of those questions answered without maybe having to email back and forth with a professor or go into an ePortfolio studio for things that resolve themselves pretty quickly when you were able to look through actual examples.
So I want to open the floor again. I may not have hit every question in the chat. What are some other questions that you all have for our students, keeping in mind that they've done ePortfolios in some fairly different environments, including I was just blown out of the water by doing, dissertation via ePortfolio, as well as when I started looking at the work that IUPUI is doing with the Life Health Sciences internships. Those are very broad and they're intensive research experiences, and the ePortfolio is a unique tool to report out at the end of that experience.
I can speak for a moment to the dissertation experience. It really was remarkable in a sense that it was necessary to have a vehicle to connect and thematically link the 3 separate articles in a multi-paper dissertation. So there's that very highly pragmatic aspect. But then what surprised me was the collegiality of the conversation. I really think due to the level of reflection that is integrated in the ePortfolio that my dissertation chair and committee and myself, we met on different ground. We met on a more collaborative footing, and the conversation evolved in a very, it was challenging and in-depth, but it was also very smooth. In terms of the other dissertation, both at the proposal stage and the final defense, those defenses that I've had the honor of sitting in on, some of them progressed quite differently. And I think it really was this modality and this communication tool. So from my point of view as a doctoral candidate, it was just a really wonderful experience as a mid-career professional.
So I'm going to grab another question out of here. What do you guys suggest to us for getting student buy-in, right? What in the world happened that you guys did this?
Can I speak to that?
Of course.
I think breaking it down into manageable pieces and having a mindset that, of course, students have more than one class they're taking that term and they have lives outside. And so whatever you can do to break it into those pieces, for example, in Candace's comp prep class, they had 3 different worksheets that helped us guide and scaffold our process of going through and building the ePortfolio. So it made it more manageable. It made it a little bit less overwhelming, right? And so I think that's a huge thing that you can do for your students.
I think one other big thing is I'm seeing in the chat a lot about like examples, and maybe not a physical e-portfolio example, but as a student being a peer to these other students who are building these e-portfolios, I think that's really valuable when another student is talking to them about how I've personally benefited from it, how I'm like using it now. And so that's why I'm really grateful to be a part of like the portfolio studio right now, because I think it's reaching out a little bit more on campus and showing how helpful and great of a tool that they can be from another student.
Actually, Inga, would you say you said 1,000% on peer feedback? I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, Candace, as you know, we were in a COVID environment, so we were doing our comps and comps prep in a remote environment. And so having a sounding board with a peer or peer group to say, hey, I'm thinking about going in this direction with this. What do you think about that? Is less scary, so to speak, than maybe going to the actual faculty advisor of the program or whatnot. And most folks are willing to do honest feedback and say, no, I don't think you should go that, you should try doing this or whatever. And it was really helpful in my peer group to be able to bounce those ideas, and it helped sculpt my thinking as I went through the process.
So Yakub, I'm thinking about the fact that you've now been in multiple very directed e-portfolios. What kind of motivated you to take those to the next level?
It was definitely about showcasing and kind of visualizing the things that I did. Like doing e-portfolio is a really good way to do that. I was able to kind of create you don't need to stick to one thing. I can do different things within the website. For your class, I was able to do a film review. I was able to do kind of just my own essay talking about what I want and talking about the environmental stuff. So it's like a good way to have like a general topic, but then a lot of subtopics and areas that you can just have all that info and kind of just having all that stuff in one space. Same for my internship. Like I can have one page that's dedicated to the things that I learned, one page dedicated to the goals that I have, one page dedicated to just the things that I achieved during my time there. And so it's a good way to kind of have a bunch of things organized in a visually appealing way. And I feel like that makes it easier for people to kind of put down what you're picking up.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm just going to real quickly share screen, and hopefully the right screen will come up. We'll see. So I think it's wonderful to kind of just have the opportunity to scroll through, and this idea of multiple modalities. So you're not just typing, you're not just, and hyperlinking, I think, takes it to the next level, but having the opportunities to share images, to share the poster that you created, which when I saw in person was way bigger than this. And then the idea that, we can navigate and see, your goals, learn more about you, hear more about the internship. This versatility that you've built into it, I think is very much kind of next level. And I appreciate having these kinds of examples available.
No, yeah, I think the keyword is versatility. I mean, as you saw, you have YouTube videos, you have pictures, you have an elevator pitch. It's not just one form of media. It's kind of just all kinds of forms of media all working together, telling the same story. And I feel like it makes it easier to convey messages that way.
I'm trying to gather most things out of the chat, and we've tried to comment on them a little bit. What if you're talking to teachers and administrators and people, honestly, that are the forward-thinking pioneers of ePortfolio past and ePortfolio future, what are things you would share with us that can challenge and direct where we might want to take ePortfolios to be more widely embraced, but also more effective for you as a way to transfer learning from one environment to another and make sense of your college experience?
I'd like to chime in on that a little
Sure.
bit. I just wanted to share briefly my background in academic support working with multilingual students. It was a really phenomenal experience to be able to connect with international students and scholars and then have them double back and come to share their e-portfolios with me. And I just want to highlight the significant transformative learning opportunity for folks to express their complex lived identities, their multilingual capabilities, and really think of e-portfolios as a tool that communicates both within academia and without, and also around the world. I think there's a lot of potential to still be tapped into in terms of perhaps even working translingually, that is, in more than one language in an e-portfolio in order to showcase culture, knowledge, and identity, and also connect folks up around the world. So I'm excited to see as we sort of shift to critical internationalization that's not place-based, that's more digital-based. I see a great potential for this tool.
I think the thing that I gained the most from portfolios was the ability to convey what I wanted a project to say in a way that is not so intimidating. It wasn't like I spent about 200 hours researching for my recommendation report, and what I gave the client looked professional and looked like I had 200 hours of research in it, but it didn't look like a 200-page stack of papers that they would have to go through and flip through. And I feel like the format of it just made it so much more navigatable and dynamic and manageable. And you could flow through the website so much quicker, I think, and so much more easily, and find the parts that you wanted to read so much more easily with this e-portfolio format, as opposed to just a stack of papers with a heavy duty staple through them.
Thank you, Michael. We've got about 7 minutes left. So if there's something burning in your heart, tell us now.
One thing that I really enjoy about e-portfolios is that you can always add to them and change them no matter what time or year it is. And it's also really helpful because for me, I'm in a lot of leadership right now as just a sophomore. So I can add on to it for my junior and senior year so I don't forget about everything that I've done. And I can share that kind of as a secondary resume for anything else that I plan to do in the future.
If I can add to that, one thing, if I could do it all over again, right, is that I would focus on having an e-portfolio at the beginning of my master's experience, where I was actually capturing the reflections at the end of each term, because at the end, because our e-portfolio process was more end focused at the back end, I had to go back and look through all those papers and try to remember my thoughts, my reflections. And if I was able to do snapshots of that throughout my program, that would have been amazing. So introducing it earlier and having that expectation that you'll need it towards the end, I think would be amazing.
Going off of that, just kind of I know that the question is kind of just to give you guys something to take with you about e-portfolios. I think that working on it in a spaced out time is way more efficient. Just kind of knowing what you're getting into from the start, knowing the effort, how much time it's going to take, and just kind of the approach of, like she said, checking in every few months, reflecting, updating, and keeping that all on track in one place can be very useful.
Terry Kurtz is popping one more thing out there. How do you guys connect the idea of ePortfolio with your other kind of social media platforms and presence online?
I shared my recommendation report on my LinkedIn.
I think doing a professional style ePortfolio as an undergraduate student kind of highlights the importance of a professional online identity. And so although my personal social media, my Instagram or Twitter, aren't directly related to my academic and professional ePortfolios, it gives me a sense of my online identity is my online identity. So keep it up professional. that's kind of what I gained from that connection.
That online identity factor is such a huge thing, I have to say. One of Candace's early worksheets that we did actually had us look and Google ourselves and see what comes up. And in reality, we don't have as much control of what's out in the verse as we thought we did, right? So seeing that and then recognizing the ePortfolio as a way to control that identity a little bit more and have that opportunity to share what we want to share about ourselves and our learning and our journey, I think is a huge thing.
I think also it's a wonderful opportunity for people who might be experiencing stuckness in terms of a writing process to switch modalities and go off and work on your ePortfolio. Sometimes unsticks you or helps you stretch in a way that helps you progress again with the writing. So I think it's just like a different language almost in terms of how you think about it, but it can be a tool for helping people to learn and move forward. Oh, there was one question in the chat. I think it was from Maria, if I could circle
Sure.
back. I would just invite learners and academics to think a little bit more critically about the potential audience that the ePortfolio, and maybe think more creatively about multiple audiences, and then to take that into account in the design process. I think it could be very liberating for people to really intentionally select more than one audience and say, okay, I'm an international student, and maybe my first language is Arabic. Here's this portion on my ePortfolio that's for my Arabic speaking audience. And here's this portion that's for my English speaking. So I think there's a lot of creativity perhaps that's underway. I've been enjoying the comments in the chat. Thank you.
So we just have 3 minutes, and I'd like one of you to address Kim's great question. Were you taught ways to think about ePortfolios with the audience in mind, like looking at rhetorical context and to make them more consumer friendly, one, and two, in the chat, I want you to just type real quick people you shared your ePortfolio with. Because I know like students will be like, I would never have shared my paper with my parents, but because it's in an ePortfolio, I shared the link. So those two things. Somebody take it away. What was done, or was something done to help you keep your ePortfolio consumer friendly? Inga, do you mind tackling that? Did anybody help you build this thing with the consumer in mind?
Well, the consumer, of course, was my audience for my comprehensive exam. But again, the panel, or excuse me, the peers that helped me construct my thinking along the way, as I mentioned earlier, my family was somewhat of a sounding board as well, constructing along the way. So that, you know, it takes a village, literally.
Definitely, definitely. So any last minute thoughts? I just want to thank you all so much for coming, but one last minute, throw something out there. I see that this is going out to everything from friends to lab leaders to advisors to professional contacts, supervisors, coworkers. It's wonderful. And I think it's important for us to realize that even with the academic focus of these ePortfolios, they need to have the kind of patience and curation to have a life after the classroom. And that's really much of the value of it. So I want to thank you guys so much for coming. This has been great. I really appreciate your time and all the like Zooms and phone calls and emails that went back and forth, and that you went the extra mile and built the ePortfolio for the presentation. That was fabulous. Again, I would invite you to pop back into the Google site and let us know what it's like to be on a panel talking about ePortfolios, and kind of how that helps you engage folio thinking in a different way. So thank you everyone for attending the session. Really fabulous questions coming up. And I appreciate the comments everyone's adding in the chat, and would just encourage you to reach out to one of us. My email is available on the website that we built, and I'm sure that you could Google stalk any of us and get to our academic emails pretty quickly. So thank you all for coming.